All right, so this is about the 6 by 10 I'm going to paint on, but I just want to take you through the process of let's say you're outside, you're walking a trail, and you come across this scene here. It's quite interesting. It's backlit trees to an extent, amazing blue reflection in the water, which a lot of people would want to capture, but that's not really necessarily what I see. And so when I come across a scene like this, I would typically get my viewfinder out, which I can show you in a little bit, or I just use my fingers because that's a lot easier at times. Do the old director thing and hold my fingers up and try to make a crop. And I think about an idea. I don't think about how beautiful it is and how much I want to capture that beauty. It's all about an idea, really. And so this next screen is how I cropped it. This is about a 6 by 10-ish crop. And what I really loved about this is the fact that we have a lot of cool in the shadows and a lot of warm in the sun behind. That said, we do have cools in the far distant hills as well. And I like this idea. And if you look closely here, you can see I added some linear lines. And it's the bands of dark and light that are really intriguing for me. And I'm kind of thinking about this at the same time that I'm holding up my fingers or my viewfinder, right? And then we have these strong verticals of these trees against these horizontals. Notice that these strong verticals, not equally spaced, everything is kind of random in a sense. And what I really like about this piece is, oddly, there is a viewpoint that you can get coming at the bottom and also to the left coming in. And so, in a sense, that is my sketch of what I'm going to paint. And it's the idea of it. And I have in my head how I want to paint it. And we will cover that, of course. And I also think about color. You can just paint what's out there. There's different phases of people who plein air paint. You go out there, you want to capture everything the way it's portrayed by nature. And then you also want to capture the exact same colors as nature. And as you progress through time, spending more time outdoors, spending more time painting, you realize you don't really need to do that. You can, of course, can make it easier in a sense, but in another sense, it doesn't really end up making a great painting in the end, right? So with this, because we have the yellow field, I'm going to try to think of this, it's more like an orangey yellow, I guess, as my primary, and then we're going to split it. So we have some blue greens, we have some blues, we have some violets. I might touch into the blue violet and the red violet, but we'll see how that goes. So this is the concept. And so I would also generally do a color study, and I can't really show you that, so I just did it digitally. And the color study, it generally breaks it down to, here's my golden ochre, which is very strong and prominent. And then the other colors, because they're darker and in the distance, they're a little more subdued. So we have this multiple split complement to go with this nice, beautiful ochre that you see in the center with these strong verticals to break it up. Because this is digital, it's a little more tight than it would be if I did it on a piece of paper. And with that, we'll go to the easel. And so this is the viewfinder I was talking about. You can get these at Opus. They're called the View Catcher. I think they're like 20 bucks, but really handy for going outside and seeing different proportions. So they have it marked on here, 8 by 14, 9 by 12, 6 by 8, and then I add my own measurements because of what I standardly use. So, and now that I have my little color study, I have my multiple sketches that I do in the field. And what I really want to do is I want to start with this idea of that ochre. So I'm going to bring in some yellow ochre. I use a yellow ochre that has PY42 in it, which is somewhat of a more of a golden ochre, so it's a little more vibrant. Aim for the right value-ish. Remember, there's some sunlit areas. I'll just scrape that in. And so I'm not too concerned about matching the color. It's not really my focus here. There we go. So that's all filled in, and there's no real value changing. We're going to adjust that because we have to decide where the focal point in this painting will be, right? And of course we have the beautiful darks, so I will just fill those in with a blue green, which is an ultramarine blue with a bit of Hansa yellow or whatever yellow you use to make it greenish. Do a test. And arguably you could say, well, that's darker than I want it, and that's fine. And so I'm not worried about mountain position. I'm not worried about grasses. And this is the beauty of having an idea, a concept of what you're painting over painting a scene, right? You don't have to worry about all the mountains and stuff like that, or the location of a rock or whatever. And then we have the distant mountains. And in my sketch that I showed you digitally, it was kind of broken up into one line. So this area right there, right? That said, though, I'm going to put a little more interest in it, and I'm going to kind of split it into two different pieces here and a little bit of lighter green here, because I think it can be a little bit of interest for the painting. And I'm going to go with more of a violet because of my color wheel that we talked about before, but it's going to be light. Oh, okay. I just use vine charcoal, soft vine charcoal, because it doesn't really mix with the paint and you can wipe it off. It's great. Regular charcoal is too hard, I find, and it stays too much. Vine charcoal is very nice. Test, I can see it's not light enough, and this is important. So when I'm out painting, like these first two I scrubbed in, I got lucky-ish. For this next one, I'm trying to get the value right in terms of pushing it back. So it looks like I have to add a lot of weight. And so you mix, you test it on your canvas, and you mix and you test it on your canvas. And that's important, because that way you establish the correct values at the beginning, right? Or the chroma, maybe this is supposed to be super chromatic. Maybe it was supposed to be super gray. I don't know. It depends what you're looking for when you're doing a test, right? There we are. And what I want this to be more of a, this is the violet. I want this more to be blue violet. So I'm going to go into my violet mixture here. Maybe add some cobalt. Cobalt darkens, so I'm going to have to add white. Too dark. Add more white. And when you do plein air paint, think of it as on a cloudy day, you know, you got like 3-4 hours. On a sunny day-ish, you have maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours. A different direction as well helps. I like painting on white because when I use bristle brushes, it actually changes the values, which is really nice. Hopefully you can see that coming through. So these values are essentially the same, but the hue is different. Thus the temperature is different, and I'm using a different direction with my brush to create a differentiation between all that. And we have this nice vibrant kind of yellow-green, but it's not as important as my focal point's going to be, which will probably be kind of in and around here, right? If you paint a scene and you don't know the intent, you don't have a focal point, then you have to sit back and think about what you want to do. If you don't have a focal area or focal point, things are going to get messy fast, and you're going to look at your painting and think, I don't know what to do. There's no reason to be painting what you're painting if you don't know what you're painting. I mean, it might be a beautiful vista, but after the beautiful vista is laid in, what are you doing? And so having the idea and intent of focal area is really important. Focal area, but focal point, I always recommend to beginners, think about focal point first. Later on, you can graduate to focal area. There we go. And for all the haters in the world, I am going to do that. I'm going to do that 50%. I'm going to end those trees right at the middle of the canvas. There we go. Because you can, doesn't matter. And the sky, I can go more towards the blue, but I do have a blue-green in my color wheel with the split complements. Whoops. And I'm just going to go to straight Viridian. I have been loving just Viridian and white for sky. A little bit too dark. I'll adjust it as I go. And I'm just laying it into single value, right? And you can see how much that charcoal has just disappeared. It doesn't matter. It'll disappear with gouache. It'll disappear with acrylic. Watercolor, I don't know. Stick to your standard practice in watercolor. All right, so I have the block in. And if we want, we can make a little bit of variation in these trees, right? Maybe they come down farther here. Keep these edges soft. Whatever you want to do. It doesn't really matter because that's not our focal point. Everything here you see is for context, right? We don't have the big masses of the trees first because I kind of want to build behind it first, much like you would when you paint a water reflection, right? So now that I know my focal area, my focal point, I'm going to build everything towards it. So in a sense, whatever the scene is doing, I can ignore or I can use it to my advantage, depending on what's happening with the light, right? Let me just fix some lines here. So if you look at the reference, you can kind of see if you squint at the right-hand side of this field is a little bit darker than the left-hand side of it, which makes sense because you have all the trees in front of it, right? Kind of changing the values, and the light is skidding across. Same thing with these mountains, in a sense, like right here is a lot lighter than over here. And if you wanted to play with that, we can, but what I want to do, my idea is I want to push this way. So I want to do the opposite of the reference photo. I want to bring you to this direction. Easiest way to do that first is to lighten this ochre. So I just add more white. White, of course, will kill the chroma, right? So it's not as vibrant, but we'll see what that does. All right, maybe I want to add a bit of yellow, regular standard yellow, to brighten that hue up, get some more warmth in it, more chroma. And so I'm not worried about what color the field actually is. It's not important. And I'm just kind of bringing it over. It's okay if some of the stuff mixes in, not a big deal. Go back to that ochre. Bring that in until I'm happy with kind of where I am. There we go. And now to get a stronger gradation, I'm going to go really dark with this ochre. I'm going to see if I can go straight ochre. Chances are I can't. Yeah, it's not really dark enough, right? So I've got a few options to darken it. I can go with the black. Feel free to use black in your palette. Or I can go like, I'll try some ultramarine. Or I can go into violet. Let's try some violet. That'll help kill the chroma of the yellow, but also give it a darker value. Yeah, it looks good. All right, so without a doubt, you derive from the left to the center, you derive from the right to the center. Let's just do a transition. And we'll go back into the light. It's a real back and forth of what happens and what you need to do to get the results you want. And I am using a bristle brush here, so it changes things a little bit. There we are. All right, now I want to do it the same with this dark green. I think what I'll do is I'll just go straight ultra and I'll just add this here. Get that dark. Maybe kill that a little bit with some sienna. So technically it's still a blue-green, it's just a lot blue. And I'm going to add some yellow to that again to come up to the area here. Maybe there's some. We'll worry about all these little bushes and stuff here later, but right now, come over. Here you can see this comes up, so we'll do some of that right now. All this is kind of just unimportant in context only, and if we want, we can bring in the some more yellowy greens, which goes against my color wheel a little bit, but I think it'll help draw you up. So everything's there. Every decision you make is based on information you have, and if you want to alter it a little bit, feel free. All right. So we drive up from this darker blue to the green to the yellower green. We drive up like that. It's per gradation, right? So, and with this yellow green, same thing that I have in those distant hills here. I will, and I think I have enough here already. I mean, I could, let's play with the sky a little bit darker at the top. There we go, a little bit of gradation in that sky as well. So you can see really now everything is concentrating into this area here. Now if we wanted to, I could make this blue hill a little bit darker. That might be interesting, but we'll leave it for now. We'll play in between the main branches as we go. So for the trunks of the trees, we have a lot of options, right? We have, if we're going to go with the violet, we have blue violet, we have standard or mid violet, and we have red violet. I'm going to try to incorporate that into all the areas. You can use a tube violet, or you can pre-mix your violets. And of course, I've lost my sketch, but I remember where everything is, and I'm just going to bring it in. I'm going to start with the bigger trees, and when you're painting trunks, I always put a mark, and put another mark, and then we kind of come down in one stroke. I don't worry about picking up paint, because that's just going to get you in trouble. You'll lose that freshness, right? Stuff like that, that dark right there, that's so nice. And this one kind of comes like this. Everything will be fixed as we go. This one over here, go down here. Right from that dark. There. This is one of the ways you can get freshness in your work too, right? A one stroke kind of thinking process. And of course we have this big trunk here. Now, thing to be careful for is this space here. If we divide it in half, I don't want my tree there. I'm going to probably bring it over a little bit just so I can have a different spacing. It's pretty straight, but you know, add some wonkiness in it. Think like a tree. I'm gonna mix up a nice pile of paint here. Really dark, which is fine. I'm going more towards the red violet. And this tree here is quite vertical, a little bit to this side, but the spacing here, I want it different. So either closer or farther. There we are. Now that I have some of this red violet, why don't I use it on these trees as well? Trying to get the dark side of these trees. And you, over time, you'll create your own language with your brush. I do a lot of dibs and dabs. Really light feeling going into these branches. I drop my brush a lot because I have such a loose hold onto my brush. I like this bunch of trees here coming out of this dark. Coming across. I'll just add more blue to those. The subtleties may not come across in the video, but you can see it on the painting. Get that dark side. All right, so now if we look at this piece, it's slowly being developed. There's definitely a push towards this area because of the contrast that I knew was going to come when we added these darker trees. But it's kind of waiting in terms of this side with the mountains. There's a push up, push down, but this kind of is a little too flat. And we could try to fake it with some of these branches and everything. But I think what I want to do is I want to just darken this area of the back mountain. I initially made it more blue than this violet side, so I'm just going to go with a darker blue. I'm choosing cobalt because I think cobalt reads more in the distance than like an ultramarine would. And so I'm not even worried too much about what all this really is. I just want the value darker. All right. Ideally, yeah, it would have been better had I done it before all these branches, but now you can see here kind of brings you in further there as well. I like that blue. It's different than the violet, right? If we wanted to, we could take some of that lighter violet that we had before, maybe add a little bit of red to it, add a lot of white. So we did go with what started off as more of a neutral violet. And we're going to push this to red violet in the distance, which seems counterintuitive to how people say that everything blues as you go in the distance. But what people say and what you do are totally different things. You get to choose what you want to do for the painting, right? Not what some workshop instructor told you. All right, that's quite interesting. You kind of have a neutral violet here going towards more of a lighter, warmer violet, and this darker blue is kind of consolidated that side. This green has gotten a little bit too, it's not dark enough. And so you can see how far from reality I am on this, right? The whole idea is what I want to say, not necessarily what I'm looking at. And I think this is the biggest thing with plein air. There we go. Primarily, I am just using the Gamsol off to my right of my palette. That's what I start with generally, and as I get into it more, I really like Gamblin's solvent-free medium liquid. I find it has a consistency like honey, and I like that stickiness. That said, I don't have any of that in my studio. I just have Galkid, so as I get moving on later, I'll probably use a little bit of Galkid. Uh-oh, have I done something wrong that you can't see it? Right now, generally, everything is pushing towards this contrast right here, right? And so this area of lightness where the field is, perhaps it's gotten a little bit too large. I have to reduce that to help push you up even further. Initially, it was good because it drew you in. But now as I progress, I might have to draw you up, in which case this area will get darker. Or maybe I can just make this lighter by scratching, but I don't think that's enough. No, I need to make that darker. That said, I'm also going to make this right-hand side a little bit darker, or left-hand side, sorry, a little bit darker. So maybe I'll do something a little bit different and do the diagonal on this field. Bring it over the green, bring it over the trees, because this edge of that tree isn't really important, right? There we go. And then I'll lighten it with some more ochre, maybe a bit of white for this area here. This might be a bit dark, but we'll see. All right, got a bit streaky in there. See if we can even it out. I mean, generally I don't worry about blending, but sometimes it's just too much. You got to get it a little bit better flow between the colors. All right, now you can sort of see here, this drives you this way and this will drive you up. I like this idea as a focal point. This has got a little bit too light for me. I mean, you always have to start somewhere. Darken this area here. That didn't do it. And so every decision I make based on where I want the viewer to look, how I want to direct them, right? And that's how you end up with a better painting than just painting a scene that you see. A little bit too dark. There we go. So you can see for sure everything now is about this area over here. Got it messed up there. Maybe I can just add that little bit of light that I need in there. There we are. So as we, if let's say I had to go pack up right now and go home, I would have quite the gist of what I really wanted to do here. But because there's a lot more information, I will start adding it. And it has to do with the light side of the trees. We have the contrast of the trees. You can see some lightness just because of my brushstrokes that I had there before, but sometimes you just need some extra bit of info. And if I remember this day, it was somewhat cloudy, so the light isn't going to be super warm. It's going to be a little cool. So if these were blue-violet trees, and I had a little bit of cool to them and a little bit light to them, it becomes more of a blue. But do I want the chroma? Depends. Let's give it a try. Might be too much. Not bad. And you could tell this was too much if you start looking at your focal point and this drew your eye away. And then you know this value here or the chroma there was so strong that it defeated the purpose. You wanted a sense of interest and light, but you don't want to take it away from your main focal point, right? So maybe I could get away with more chroma, but I'll leave it at that for now. And even here, there's a bit of nice sparkle of light. How does that look? Yeah, I can still play with that. Still works. Yeah, that's the facing. This tree here reflects down and the cast is more green. So I'm actually going to use a lighter green there. Plein air painting really helps train your eye because you think there's a light on that side of the tree, and there is, but that light isn't coming from the sky. It's coming from the reflection off the greenery, and that's important to start being able to differentiate because it adds realism without needing to paint realism. I will add foliage, but not in the sense of complexity of leaves. I'll just add values and or some dibs and dabs to indicate foliage. Add some of this letter value down here. We'll see what that does. Side. So I'm going back and forth on where to add this green value. It was a reflection of this tree, but also, we got that. Remember I talked about the arrow that was down here to help lead you in, as well as this arrow that I had on my sketch. I want to lead you in through the bottom, and I have a nice dark, but I'm thinking I need a little bit of lighter green. But I can't make it too light, right? Because the contrast too much. So I'm just looking for maybe something like that. Yeah, because you're in this dark, but then you come up to the light, so that helps draw you in. Little things like that, huge difference. And in this instance, I didn't make it up because I actually saw it in the reference photo. What I could do is I can go back to the full reference photo, and you can see in the bottom area there, it's between the trees. There's a little, not necessarily path, but less bushes, I guess. So what next? Well, the sky got a little bit too bright to the top here, so let's start reducing that. Yes, skies are bright, but in this instance, it's not working for me. And I could fill that in with foliage or whatever, but then that's too much work. You gotta you have to be efficient. So I'll start with the big gradation first. Right there. Kind of lost it, but that's okay. I can add a bunch of white now, bring that in. So it's always back and forth, always a back and forth. And generally I'll put down some pigment and I will step back 6 to 8 feet to decide if that was kind of what I wanted. And it's starting to work a little bit better. I think I can draw you down with the mountains a little bit more with those red violet ones. So we'll just lighten that a little bit more. Maybe add a little more red, which turns it pink, which goes against everything in the reference photo. But that's not my intent, right? So right there, probably go with a little more white. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's always about painting for the sake of the painting, never for the sake of what you see. And I know a lot of you that'll just go right past you. It went past me at the beginning. All I wanted to do was paint what I saw because I'm being true to where I am, right? But in the end, it doesn't make an effective painting. It's an effective scene or something that other people would say, oh, that looks pretty, but it really doesn't evoke anything, right? So let's go to kind of a long round or rigger brush and go into my darks and some violets. Make it really thin. Thinner paint goes over thicker paint. And let's just try adding some trees. Thinking about location, thinking about how everything overlaps, thinking about how trees are very arbitrary. How things come out of trees. You hold your brush, don't worry about it doing weird things, right? Never see this. I love it too linear. I don't like it, but we'll see what happens with it. This tree here, it's a little bit too straight. We'll see how little we can do with that. Go with the ultramarine blue, change it up. Don't stick with your one flavor. Yeah, more or less. Those are always the colors that I always bring, and that's what I always will use. And you can always shift them. Some can be more chromatic, some can be duller. It really all depends what I want to say in the painting, right? I'm gonna throw in some transparent red oxide, which goes, I guess it goes against my color strategy, but you could argue it's a dark ochre. I don't know. I'm thinking, I just feel I need a little something here. I need some warmth in these trees down below a little bit. Although it's dark. I love the coolness, but I think just a little bit of warmth can help. Not a lot, not everywhere, right? Kind of in the area where I want to draw your eye up to. So let's go into kind of the foliage now. So this foliage is like a dark green and a lighter green. My strategy was to have more of a blue-green, which I utilize down here. I think I'm going to stick with it for the majority of the foliage, but in some instances, I will start doing some yellow-green as well, and we'll see how that goes. So my blue-green, I have a lot of options because I have my ultramarine blue, I have my cobalt, and you can mix those together and arguably get a neutral blue, but I don't really know about that. I can go with some of the ochre instead of the yellow to create my green. That'll be a more subdued, less saturated green by far. Maybe we'll start with that. So I'm always worried about value and chroma and hue only in terms of my color strategy. And this is very open, so I want to close this a little bit. So I'll just start putting in some of the foliage. Foliage is really good because it can just instantly change your focal point direction, which is really nice, right? And you can do little dabs. You can do large swaths. I mean, remember this is a planar piece, so if you don't want to be more representational, then you don't have to be. It all depends what you're going for, right? So there can be swaths of foliage without sticks or trees leading up to them, right? Let's cover that corner there. So now this corner is pretty much been closed in, so I have no choice but to go over this side, right? How we are for the white balance. There we go, a little bit brighter. And for maybe for the right hand side, maybe I want to go more blue. So let's go more cobalt. Really change that up. You might not be able to see it on screen, but when you're up close in the painting, you can see how much more blue it is over here. And there's a nice chunk over here. Helps cover that sky, which is nice. Foliage is just one of those things you put in randomly. You try to look, you go, okay, there's something here, but then you don't worry about being precise about it because it's just going to mess you up, I find. You're getting a little bit of mix of the paint beneath it, which is fine. Stand back and look at it. And now I really want to bring this forward more, even though this is a focal point. I find I'm split, kind of, do I look here or do I look in here? So I need to fix that. And because I really like focal points that are off to the edges more, I think I'm going to pick this area more for a focal point. So I have to adjust the ochre. And this is the beauty about painting because it's your preference, right? I mean, I could easily make this the focal point. Hell, I could even subdue all this, move the focal point over here, and then you find the trees. There's so much you could do with this painting. I could probably make 3 or 4 different paintings with this idea that somewhere in this field is a focal point and leave everything else the same. Easy peasy. But for this particular piece, I'm going to make it more over here. I just got to change some values here. This brush is one I hardly ever used, and recently I've gotten into it for just random stuff like this. It's a sword type brush, and it's really good for trees because it's randomish. Otherwise, I really love the long, thin rigger brushes. I really like those too because they're good for branches. But there's nothing beats this for randomness, whether it's a little poke or a large swath. Yeah, it's quite interesting. I bought it years ago because another artist that I liked used it a lot, and then so I bought it and I never used it. And then the other day, like I don't know, 3-4 weeks ago, for some trees. I don't know why. I thought, oh my god, this is amazing. Let's see if I can accentuate that. Now, the thing about yellow is it decreases with distance when you're out in the field, but we're not painting reality, are we? There we are. So yeah, you can start seeing this focal point come to life a little bit more. Let's play with it. Maybe we can add some more lighter red violet where the yellow meets the mountain. I don't know if this will go against us or for us, but you don't know until you try. And so I made a mix. I don't know. Let's test it. Yeah, whether or not it helps us. I'm gonna have to stand back and take a look. Yeah, it doesn't really help us or hinder us. So I'm just gonna leave it as is, right? Now, one thing I really love to do too to create interest is, you have all these sticks. I just like to sometimes scrape in. And this is really good for scenes like this, just because they're so thin, right? And they're just random sticks. Also, you can hash a little bit so you can see how that changes that value and kind of brings you up. Look at it from a distance. You know what? I don't mind that. Maybe now I'm going to go like this. Change that. Does that compete? Maybe, eh? And so if it competes, I'll come back in with the brush. Kind of change it a little bit. There we are. So until you do something, you don't really know. Maybe I need a little more grass on this side. And you can see that stroke was a mistake because when I stand back now, I kind of ping pong. So I will have to fix that and adjust it until I'm happy with it. And so this generally fits into my scheme, right, of the color wheel that I have here. Where is it? So we can argue that the main color is my yellow ochre, and I've split complementary. A split complementary doesn't have to be two. It doesn't have to be a violet and a blue. It doesn't have to be a blue, violet, or a green. Use whatever then you can. Heck, I could even push up to some reds and some greens if I really wanted to. I kind of did push up to the yellow greens, right? But saying here, we have our blue violets and we have our blues. And then we have our blue greens and a tiny bit of yellow greens. And we have some red violets that I've added into the trees. And so it creates, you always hear people say it creates a harmony. And anything you paint will have a color harmony. I can describe anything you paint with any kind of concept based on what's out there. The intent here, though, was I was focused on creating something with a specific color intent, and I didn't vary from it, right? I don't have any strong reds, for instance. I mean, I could easily put a strong red maybe in here and it'd be a barn. It goes against everything in their color theory, but it doesn't matter because that'll be my focal point. Everything that people say has a purpose, but understand that everything you paint will have a color harmony regardless. So I'm just trying to think. I'm trying to push this red violet in a few of these trees, see what happens. I don't know if it's a good idea or not. I mean, I kind of did when I added the transparent red oxide into this one. Like I said, you can't overdo it, otherwise it's going to take over, right? Some there. Yeah, see, it seems out of place. It really does for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back. I'm just going to go back into my straight blue violet. Yeah, to me that has a better overall harmony, I guess, for lack of a better word. Just feels more complete that way. Do some dibs and dabs here and there, as long as they don't detract from the focal point. And I don't know really what else to do to this piece, right? Making a signature is important. Where would you put it? You wouldn't put it up in the top right because I don't think you'd really see it, but put it on the left or the right. I mean, generally for plein air painting, if you're painting in acrylics, you can't really do this, but if you paint with oils and you have a white ground or a light ground. So basically what I do is I take a paintbrush, any paintbrush, pencil sharpener, right? And you know, I don't just do this for signatures, but it's really good for, it's just really good for scraping into, right? Instead of using a back of your brush that has no point, having a brush with a point can be helpful sometimes when creating small things. That said, though, I would generally sign with it too, because it scrapes the paint off and leaves your signature. I'm just going to see if I can get a little bit lighter sky. Maybe I'll add a touch of yellow to warm it up. I'll put some right here. I don't know if you guys can see that, but I like it, but it draws my eye up too much. And so it's choices like that that need to be done, but in the end, it doesn't fit the painting, right? So let's say you're looking out there and all of a sudden this beautiful light came over these mountains that was really warm or really light because there's a cloud there or something like that, and you want to capture that. And that's what I love about plein air painting. It just changes so much. You can use ideas that happen in the field, right? But then you put it in and you realize, you know what? That will detract from my focal point. And so it needs to be removed. As beautiful as that is, it needs to be taken out. So here's a thought for you. You can, if you take this back to the studio and you remember that, it's like, you know what? I really love that warm light in the sky. So I'm going to shift it now. I'm going to, instead of making the focal point the farmland, I'm going to subdue this yellow again, but I'll make this sky really vibrant against this mountain. And now your focal point is this area here instead of here. There's so much you can do, right? For example, I got caught at this. I've turned a great painting into a shitty painting because let's say the sun comes through and it starts beautiful light on this ochre field, right? I'll show you what happens. So, you know, they talk about chasing light, and yeah, you can't do that if you have a lot of shadows. Sometimes you can do it for stuff like this that happens, right? The clouds or some light. But if you do it a lot, it really goes against your whole idea. Let's say there's some beautiful light here, right? And now what you have is a flatter painting. You're kind of going, you keep on going back and forth, right? I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but it's not as an enjoyable painting as if that was when that was dark. However, saying that, reverse it all. Easy. Your focal point's returned, right? So I guess the emphasis that I'm trying to put on here is, you know, if you're just starting out painting or plein air painting, think focal point. If you have a few years under your belt, think focal area. But without a doubt, you will always need to think of one or both of those, no matter what level you are. Otherwise, you'll get a mundane painting. All right, this was a point in the demo that I was pretty much finished and I didn't have really anything more to add to the painting. So I thought I'd just end it here. If you have any questions, of course, leave them in the comments below. And here I'll give you some detailed shots of the painting.